Good morning, Brew Daily Show. I'm Neal Freyman.
And I'm Toby Howell.
Today, could the United States Postal Service be privatized? Newman would like a word.
Then Germany is riding das struggle bus after its government collapsed under the weight of economic turmoil. It's Tuesday, December 17th. Let's ride.
Have you noticed that people are randomly talking about Interstellar a lot, even though the movie came out in 2014? Well, it's probably because Christopher Nolan's space epic has returned to IMAX theaters for a few weekends now, and just became the highest-grossing IMAX re-release of all time, earning $17.4 million already in its run. It started a bunch of chatter online about which movie or movies should be the next on the docket for an IMAX re-release. I know you've got some ideas, Toby.
I've got some ideas. One of my favorite movies of all time is Mad Max Fury Road, which would undoubtedly slap in the IMAX format. But also thinking of good movies to re-release in IMAX is kind of boring. So my mind went to what would be the worst movie of all time to release in IMAX. And I think the answer has to be Cats. I mean, the movie adaptation of the Broadway musical that catified everyone from, Ian McKellen to Taylor Swift. It was a nightmare for you, and I'd love to see them in, 10-foot tall versions of themselves on an IMAX theater.
People would probably go ironically.
Yeah, ironically. Do you have a movie that you would like to see re-released?
Well, I was looking at the film critics from Variety put together a list, and they were pretty good, so I'll just say 5 of them. Pulp Fiction would be amazing. Gravity, which is another space film that people say is even better than Interstellar, so that would be, a sensory overload. Fight Club could be good, and then Casino Royale, one of the best Bond flicks of all time, and finally Blade.
See, it's boring to think of good movies, because of course those are all slap.
Yeah, it's not that surprising.
Now, a word from our sponsor, Range Rover Sport. Neal, one thing about the Range Rover Sport is you're going to get a machine with exceptional balance.
A balance between on-road performance and off-road capability of sophisticated refinement and visceral power.
But just because it's balanced doesn't mean it's playing it safe. This car is for the leaders in your life, the risk takers.
Those people that plunge into life with passion and determination like Toby plunges into a bacon, egg, and cheese.
If you are someone who leads by example, even if it's taking a bite of a perfectly toasted everything bagel, the Range Rover Sport is for you.
Build a Range Rover Sport that matches your style at LandRoverUSA.com. That's LandRoverUSA.com. The incoming Trump administration has promised sweeping measures to cut costs in the government, and one controversial aspect of the plan has picked up steam in recent days, taking USPS private. The U.S. Postal Service, whose origins in 1775 predate the country itself, is currently a self-funded, independently operating public sector entity. But its business model is collapsing. Its main revenue source, people sending Mother's Day cards and wedding thank you notes, has plunged into the past few decades, leading to a net loss of $9.5 billion in the last fiscal year. Advisors to Trump think the USPS would be better off left to its own devices rather than being subsidized by the government. So they've recommended cutting it loose, the Washington Post reported over the weekend. At a press conference yesterday, Trump confirmed the rumors, saying there is talk about the Postal Service being taken private. Not the worst idea I've ever heard. It really isn't. He added that we are looking at privatizing the service. Toby, turning the USPS into a for-profit entity would be a seismic event for the trillion-dollar e-commerce industry, likely leaving small businesses and rural communities in the lurch. Do you think it would ever get the stamp of approval?
It's tough because the Postal Service is one of America's most beloved federal agencies. It trails only the National Park Service in a 2024 Pew Research study of most favorable outlooks on these services. But it has become this target, especially in this era of DOGE, government efficiency, that we are about to enter. It has been a popular target to potentially become privatized so it could save the government a little bit of money. The Postal Service is a loss-making machine. It lost $9.5 billion in the last fiscal year. It has $80 billion in liabilities on its balance sheet right now. So obviously it's going to come up as maybe a hot button issue when you are trying to cut costs from the government, but it is one of those things that a lot of people rely on. So it's more complicated than just, oh, it's losing money, we need to do something about it. It provides a very essential service for a lot of Americans.
It provides an essential service because there is a requirement that is known as the Universal Service Obligation, which requires it to deliver mail to all parts of the country, Alaska, rural communities, places that maybe a for-profit delivery service would not go, or at least, bunch them together and only deliver once a week. The USPS has to deliver to those because it is a government-funded organization and is required to go there as a loss-making entity. Like, it's a for-profit business would never do that. So that's why the USPS is important to those communities. And if it were to be privatized, I mean, we live in New York City. If we want to go to if we want to order something from Amazon, it could get here prime 2 days or even same day. If we lived in the boonies, then Amazon would probably take a lot longer to deliver. And if the USPS was privatized, that's probably what would happen.
And that's why it isn't a universally popular thing to try to privatize the postal office, because a lot of Republicans representing rural districts are not going to be on board with this, because you don't want to take away mail services to your constituents. Let's talk a little bit about Amazon. Amazon is the Postal Service's largest customer. It uses it. Remember, Amazon is constantly trying to figure out last mile delivery. The Postal Service is its biggest, way it fulfills that last mile delivery, going from fulfillment centers to your actual home. So you mentioned the e-commerce industry. This would really disrupt it if you disrupt the Postal Service, because it relies so much upon it. And so, yeah, I don't think that it's going to be popular with Amazon. Trump has in the past, called out Amazon and said the Postal Service should double prices when it comes to Amazon, because he had a feud with Jeff Bezos dating back to his last administration. We'll see if he kind of strikes a similar anti-Amazon tone here in this next iteration of potentially, trying to bring the Postal Service private.
If you look at it as a private company, you'd be like, this thing is uninvestable. Like, they are a company that was made for the 1950s. They are not made for the 2024. I mean, their biggest revenue source is sending mail. So in 2001, that's when mail peaked in the United States. 104 billion pieces were sent, but it's just been absolutely plunging since then. In 2019, just 55 billion pieces of mail were sent. So it's got to find other revenue sources. It's done this business with Amazon. Democrats wanted to make it into a quasi-bank. So, it's a tough business to be in the mail business.
Right, your thank you notes, people. That's what I'm taking away from this.
Okay, big European country tried to have a functioning government challenge. With its neighbor France in its worst political turmoil in decades, Germany said, hold my Hefeweizen. Yesterday, Chancellor Olaf Scholz lost a vote of confidence in Parliament, paving the way for elections in February, 7 months earlier than originally scheduled. The next German government basically only has one overarching New Year's resolution, and that's to kickstart an economy that's remained in neutral or worse for the past 5 years. The country, Europe's largest economy, is facing its biggest economic crisis since reunification 35 years ago. And even worse, this once vaunted industrial juggernaut is plagued by structural problems not easily fixed. Problems like chronic underinvestment, losing cheap Russian energy following Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and getting its lunch eaten by companies in China. Bloomberg estimates that the decline in German competitiveness means every household is worse off by $2,600 a year since the pandemic. And even with the early election, it looks like more political deadlock is in store, which is not a recipe for the ambitious reforms Germany needs to regain its economic footing. Analysts compare Germany's economy, I'm analyst, to an old air mattress that slowly but surely loses its structural integrity until there's nothing left propping it up. Toby, let's say you become Chancellor of Germany in February. How are you tackling the country's economic malaise?
Well, it's tough because you need the government to spend some money here. They're under a ton of pressure to spend on defense, on infrastructure, on social welfare, on getting your vaunted manufacturing industry back in its groove. But the problem with Germany is they're very austere. They have this actually debt break that is in their constitution, which effectively hamstrings them of what they can do with their budget. They are not allowed to their debt cannot exceed 0.35% of GDP. So their hands are behind their back here. They can't do much to increase spending from the government to try to reverse this doldrum it's been in. So I don't know what I would do. I would probably get ousted as well because there's just not an easy path forward here.
Yeah, they're maybe looking for ways to, get around this debt break so they can spend more. It reminded me of our debt ceiling that the United States doesn't really seem to care about that much.
But the Germans do.
The Germans do. The problem is, the problem here is very structural. Germany used to be an export powerhouse. In 1986, 87, 88, and 90, they were the world's largest exporter. They were exporting more than the Americans, way more than the Japanese, and they sold a lot of those goods, especially cars, to China. Now China is a manufacturing powerhouse. Especially their auto industry, they're selling not just in China, but also in the European market. And you just look at, the German automakers, they're absolutely collapsing in China, which was their largest market. The latest quarter, BMW, 30% revenue plunge. Mercedes, 13% decline in sales. Volkswagen, 15% decline. So they can't sell as much as they used to in China. Meanwhile, I talked about the gas situation. The energy prices that go into their factories are rising because they used to get 55% of their gas from Russia. That has been severed after the war. So, it is a tough situation there for Europe's largest economy.
SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son, never one to shy away from a big bet, is doubling down on America. The mercurial Japanese tech investor announced a $100 billion investment in the U.S. over the next 4 years, making the pledge during a visit to President-elect Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate yesterday. Son loves putting a lot of his chips on red and white and blue. During the last Trump presidency in 2016, he pledged to invest $50 billion in the U.S. economy and create 50,000 jobs. While he technically fulfilled that lofty financial obligation by the end of Trump's term, nearly half of the money went into funding the office space startup WeWork, according to Axios. This time around, Son and SoftBank have their sights set on the AI industry and promise to work with Trump to create 100,000 jobs at a minimum related to artificial intelligence, data centers, and chip manufacturing. Neal, Masayoshi Son is back and ready for round 2.
He's back. It feels like we're 2016 all over again. This guy, for people who maybe weren't paying attention for business news, kind of upended the venture capital industry and the startup community in the United States when he raised $100 billion for a vision fund and was plowing hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, into American startups like Uber, like WeWork. A lot of them were flops, like WeWork. There was a robot pizza making company. A lot of them did well. Uber, and he's an investor in NVIDIA as well, and in ARM, which is a chip designer that just recently went public and is doing really well. So this guy, you're right, he's known for taking big bets, and he's also known for cozying up to President Trump, and so he just finds these big like round numbers and loves them, and is going to make the announcement. But we'll see whether he can actually follow through on this, because SoftBank only has $30 billion cash on hand. He's pledging $100 billion, 100,000 jobs. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's a little unclear where that money is going to come from. A lot of people are looking at this more of a potential PR play than an actual change in investment strategy because, even back in 2016, SoftBank was already going to deploy its vision fund into the United States in U.S. companies. So making that announcement, people are like, all right, you're already doing this anyway. And it's similar here because they already have been investing heavily in AI. They had plans to go even deeper. So just sidling up next to Trump and making that announcement maybe is more of a PR play. That being said, though, Trump did say that he wants to fast track investment in the United States. He said any company that invests $1 billion or more in the U.S. would receive fast track permitting. So it does go along with his agenda as well. So you can see both the agendas were aligned here. They did want to make a headline in announcing this. Up next, it's Tuesday, which means it is time for Toby's Trends. Open up that Notes app on your phone where you keep track of baby names, because today's Toby's Trend is all about the sudden resurgence of so-called virtue names. What are virtue names? Well, they're not Toby or Neal. Instead, think patience or prudence or chastity, names that stem from traditional, often Puritan virtues. They used to be all the rage. In the 90s, there were more American newborns with virtue names than in the 1780s. But according to a Washington Post analysis, we're still riding a virtuous name wave to this day. U.S. women's national team goalie Hope Solo, former Trump press secretary Hope Hicks, NBA journeyman Justice Winslow. The more you look, the more they start popping up. Originally popular in Puritan times, the more modern appeal of virtue names isn't reflective of a sudden renewal of religious vigor. Instead, the booms can be traced back to pop culture. The sitcom Will and Grace, which originally ran in 1998 to 2006, for instance, coincided with the rise in babies named Grace, while names like Faith saw a boost after George Michael's album of the same name sold 25 million copies.
Faith to faith.
I know you like that.
Yeah.
Neal, any harmonies or serenities in your life?
No, but I will say there are a lot of graces, and it was very interesting tracing back the origins of the word grace, because again, it was kind of like the pop culture of the 1840s. There was a girl in Britain who saved 9 people from a shipwreck named Grace Darling, and that was, I guess, their sitcom, TV show of the day. So everyone started naming their girls Grace, and that when they all came over to the United States, then they continued the Grace phenomenon. In the 1850 census, 1 in 4 Graces in the United States were British or Irish immigrants. So that one incident that probably was played over and over again in the British newspapers led to, a phenomenon here in the United States when it came to baby naming.
And then you can also track it to some more modern names as well. I mean, the rise of the country singer Faith Hill led a lot of people to be named Faith. There was also a character named Faith in the TV series Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Chastity actually started popping off after Sonny and Cher picked it for their child. But honestly, a lot of these virtue names can also be tracked back to another explanation, and that is names ending in Y became a lot more trendy recently. So harmony, serenity, the most common endings for virtue names is ending in Y, and names ending in Y are experiencing one of their biggest booms in decades as well. So maybe it's less that they are virtue names and more that they just end in Y. Toby, Neal. No, not quite.
One interesting thing about virtue names is that they often go together in twins. So in 2011 in the U.S., Faith and Hope were the 4th most common pairing of names for twins. So you can often pair these together and you get a very virtuous household.
And this came from this big Washington Post analysis from their Department of Data, and they offered one name that they think is different, old-fashioned, but not off-trend, and that is sapience, which means wisdom. So again, pull out that notes app in your phone. I know everyone has, their running list of baby names, or at least people my age do. Put sapience on there because you could be kicking off a new trend of virtue names. Now, let's sprint to the finish with some headlines you may have missed. Up first, Donald Trump met with TikTok CEO Shou Zi Chew at Mar-a-Lago yesterday as the company tries to dance out of the potential nationwide ban it's facing. TikTok filed an emergency petition asking the Supreme Court to halt a law that would require ByteDance, its parent company, to sell the app by January 19th, arguing the ban infringes on its First Amendment rights. Trump, who was once all gung-ho about banning the app during his first term, has switched his tune and told reporters yesterday that he has a, quote, warm spot for the app. Neal, we don't know much about how the actual meeting went, but it's clear that Shou Zi Chew is wasting little time trying to get the new administration on his side.
Yeah, it's not quite clear what Trump could do to stop this ban from going into effect because Congress passed this and they are ready to make it happen. They issued letters recently to Google and Apple saying, you guys better be prepared to take TikTok off your app stores because if not, we're going to find you. So that TikTok's throwing up a Hail Mary to the Supreme Court. Trump could extend the deadline. That's one thing that was written into the law that the president can do. So he can't kill it, but he can extend it, or he could help TikTok find a buyer, right? It's not necessarily a ban on TikTok. It's the law forces ByteDance to sell TikTok to an American buyer. So Trump, if he considers himself a deal maker, could look into that. So those are a few of the options. I know he has a warm spot for TikTok, but there's just even as the president, his hands are tied a little bit. I expect maybe the deadline to get kicked.
Right. That's the problem. Trump's second term begins on January 20th.
Right.
The deadline is set for January 19th. So how can he do much if he's not even inaugurated yet? So
we might have the shortest lived TikTok ban in history.
Yeah, one day.
A massive congressional investigation led by Bernie Sanders into Amazon found the company manipulated data on warehouse worker injuries and ignored internal research that offered ways to improve the situation. Sunday night, the majority staff of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, which Bernie oversees, issued a scathing report that found Amazon recorded 30% more employee injuries last year than the warehouse industry average, and that in its own internal research, it linked its productivity quotas to higher injury rates. The company, which has been investigated by Bernie and others for its warehouse work culture, said the report was, quote, wrong on the facts, and that Bernie cherry-picked data and anecdotes to suit his narrative, which is that Amazon is putting profits above people.
Yeah, this is a cherry pick-off because Bernie and his committee thinks that the company had been cherry-picking stats to hide the fact that its warehouses are more dangerous than they might appear. And then Amazon pushed back and say, no, you're cherry-picking stats, and especially people, because Amazon's main gripe with this report was that it was relying on anecdotes from a relatively small portion of their workforce. Remember, Amazon employs 800,000 frontline workers. This committee interviewed 130 workers. So Amazon pointed out that that is 0.018% of its hourly workforce. So how can you draw broad conclusions about their warehouse staff when you're only talking to this few amount of people?
Have they ever heard of sampling?
I know.
How many people could you possibly interview? You can't interview 500,000 people.
Hey, I'm just saying what the company said in their report. But yeah, you are right. And this is something that, Amazon has been under intense scrutiny for years. There's another attorney from the Southern District of New York has been investigating allegations as well. So this isn't going away anytime soon. Apple thinks it's figured out a way to reverse flagging sales, and it's origami. The biggest company in the world is reportedly developing two foldable devices. One, a giant foldable iPad that could unfold to the size of two iPad Pros, and the other, an iPhone model that would unfold to a size slightly larger than its current largest iPhone, the 16 Max. Now, Apple has been pretty slow to enter this foldable market, but current foldable technology resulted in a phone too thick for Apple's standards. So it's hoping its slow and steady approach with a slated 2026 release date means it's entering the market at just the right time to reverse its flagging sales that saw 2024 revenue grow less than 1%. Neal, do we think foldable phones are going to save Apple?
Well, we knew about the foldable phones. The new news here was the foldable iPad. So you have two iPad Pros back to back, and that might be coming in 2028. So I don't know whether people might want to have a Mac laptop and then a massive foldable iPad. But the problem is people do want bigger screens, but when you ship it, you can't build a screen, or you can't ship a screen that big. It just gets too expensive and unwieldy. So they're going to fold this iPad and hopefully have that crease removed. That's been the biggest technological blocker. I mean, I'm not an iPad user, but I could probably see someone liking this.
Yeah, they've for years tried to say you can replace your computer with your iPad, which is awkward messaging for a company that also sells, laptops. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people have just been tired with Apple for not innovating enough recently. It's mostly been on the software side, or when it comes to iPhones, just a camera update here and there. So they are trying to take bigger swings now and say, hey, you want something different? Here's a foldable phone. Here's a foldable iPad.
Didn't really work with the headset.
The Vision Pro, that was a big swing and a big miss. So, I mean, I guess it's better that they're taking swings. I don't know if foldable is the right direction for them, though.
Apple released the top 10 most downloaded apps from the App Store this year, and coming in at number 1 for the second year running is Temu, the Chinese shopping marketplace. Temu claimed the top spot from TikTok last year and held on to it, likely thanks to the popularity of its ultra-cheap products and its ubiquitous marketing. Coming in second, Meta's Threads. TikTok is number 3. We'll see how long that lasts. And 4 and 5 are ChatGPT and Google Search, respectively. Toby, people just love to shop like a billionaire.
They do love to shop like a billionaire. Also, you look down all the way on the list, Amazon is number 20. So Temu is definitely, leaving them in the dust as well. There's a few interesting things about this year's top 10 list. You mentioned ChatGPT as the 4th most downloaded app. It is ahead of Google Search app. ChatGPT didn't make the top 10 last year. It only released in May on iPhone. So it is interesting interesting to see how much that has shot up. And then one final name I want to call out here is in the top 20 is Max. It's the only streaming service that made it on the list. Warner Bros. Has low-key been having a really good back half of the year, and I think it's on the back of the, interest in Max, only streamer in the top 20. So that's a name that they definitely like to see in that top 20.
Remember when people said that, the change from HBO Max to Max would be the death knell of the streaming platform?
I think I said those words.
You did. I defended it, first of all. We have it on tape, so Ray and Emily, let's bring that up so I can have my vindication. Okay, let's wrap it up there. Thanks so much for spending your morning with us, and have a wonderful Tuesday. For any questions, comments, or feedback, send an email to morningbrewdaily@morningbrew.com, or make like the Postal Service and deliver this podcast to someone you know who could be a little more informed about current events. As for who that someone is, Toby is here with a sharing idea.
Okay, so it's Secret Santa season right now. So I want you to share the podcast with someone you definitely didn't forget to buy a gift for. Now you might think, a podcast as a gift. Well, to that I say, package it as giving the gift of staying up to date with the business world, something that arguably is priceless and can even make you money. So maybe MBD for Secret Santa. I'm telling you, it could be the move.
Let's roll the credits. Emily Milliron is our executive producer. Raymond Liu is our producer. Olivia Graham is our associate producer. Uchenna Ogu is our technical director. Billy Menino is on audio. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays hair and makeup from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Devin Emery is our chief content officer, and our show is a production of Morning Brew.
Great show today, Neal. Let's run it back tomorrow.